Who wants to play the Harlem Globetrotters video game? I'd rather be playing Indiana Jones, but that would go against the purposes of this video. So I should probably plug this in first before yeah, okay, go to the thing, whatever. Cut.
Today's subject matter involves the Harlem Globetrotters. For those who may not be familiar with the Harlem Globetrotters, they were a group of basketball players known for their topsy-turvy ball tricks and their impressive 11 billion win streak over perennial losers, the Washington Generals. It was all an act that got popular, and as usually is the case, if something gets one iota of remote popularity, they are deserving of their own video game. And so 1991 brought us Harlem Globetrotters for the Nintendo Entertainment System, published by GameTech and conceived by Softy. There was actually a developer called Softy. You learn something new every day. GameTech around this time was known mainly for publishing NES games based on game show properties such as Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, so presumably this was uncharted territory for GameTech, as well as for the hapless players who ventured into this tool of demonic nightmares. I mean, seriously. Dude, those faces. So the game opens up with a member of the Harlem Globetrotters, I don't know which one, it seems pretty generic, and seriously, that face, asking you some questions. Do you want to play against the computer? Do you want to play as the Harlem Globetrotters? Or the opposing team, the Washington Generals? How many people are playing this? Up to 4 players can join in on the fun if you have like a 4-player accessory, like an NES 4-score or an NES satellite. How many minutes in a quarter? 1 to 12. And your skill setting of either rookie or pro if you're playing against a computer. Right off the bat, things take a turn for the worse when in order to confirm your selections, you have to press select rather than start, which just cycles through the options. That's rather unfortunate. Anyway, once you get through the options, your game of basketball begins, and it plays about the same way you would play any game of basketball. You try to score more points than the other team, and a good chunk of basketball rules and penalties and things of that nature. At the end of each quarter, you have a scorecard showing you your stats. At the halftime point, you have this deformed member of the Harlem Globetrotters doing some tricks to amuse the audience, but everything about this sequence makes me long for a torch because that's nightmare-inducing. And after 4 quarters, whoever has the most points wins, and the game is over. One game, and you get to do the whole shebang over and over and over again. At the end of the day, these are exhibition games, and if you were expecting more than that, well, you're not getting more than that. And to be quite honest, this feels pretty bare bones in general, and quite frankly, a bit underwhelming. Yes, the Globetrotters play silly exhibition games that's largely predetermined because a good chunk of these games are silly tricks that wouldn't fly in an actual basketball game, and the poor generals, may they rest in peace, have to stand there while they do these tricks to entertain the crowd. But this Harlem Globetrotters video game is just straight up basketball with only a few trick shots, which can be performed by pressing the select or start buttons. Yeah, there's no pausing in Harlem Globetrotters, which is odd. The intermissions are the closest thing to pauses in the game, and the trick shots aren't always the most functional or effective in terms of response time. Probably has to be done in certain conditions or whatever the case may be, but when you can pull them off, they don't look all that impressive. If anything, they look rather tame. Now, the bare-bones nature of Harlem Globetrotters might be a turnoff for some, but it's a bit more lacking than that even. I can understand the lack of detailed stats, team managements, or other tidbits you associate with more serious sports titles, but any basketball game, or rather any sports game in general worth its salt, would allow you to switch players when you're on the defensive. It's a common game mechanic that allows you to switch to a player with the better chance of stealing the ball, puck, thing, whatever, or defend from a goal, or whatever the case may be. Harlem Globetrotters does not have said functionality. Whoever has the ball last is your player of choice, and only if another player gets possession of the ball does the control switch to said player. There is no way to switch players manually, which would have been a nice feature to have since almost every other competent sports title has this very basic feature. On the bright side, Control is workable to the point where the basic functionality works well enough. You could move around, you could pass, you could shoot, you could steal, you could do trick shots, that sort of thing. The trick shots, like I said before, are tricky to pull off and use effectively, and while the game touts being able to pull down referee pants and that sort of juvenile action, I've yet to figure this out. Not that it would have helped me much, because quite frankly I'm terrible at these sorts of games, but nonetheless, it's something worth mentioning, I suppose. Harlem Globetrotters sports some less than stellar visuals, not the least of which includes the anonymous Globetrotter who greets you during halftime, and the starting screens with his lanky arms and his horrifying face that may be all smiles on the surface, but behind the grin lies a creature of pure evil that must be destroyed before the buzzards arrive. And what was I talking about again? I don't remember. Aside from that point, the game doesn't look too bad actually. It's a fairly simplistic looking game, and as such, one shouldn't expect impeccably detailed visuals, but it does a fair enough job of depicting a typical basketball court with some somewhat human looking players. I like the player with the ball is the one with the flashing jersey. I like that the Globetrotters are all colored people, while the generals are all white dudes. I like the loud color scheme on the center court, or whatever you call those. Actually, no, I don't like the red and blue spilled on the floor. It looks pretty damn stupid. I don't care if it's a Harlem Globetrotters themed court. It hurts my eyes, actually, to be honest with you. There's minimum sounds in terms of the action. Some mild noise that passes as cheers, some beeps and bleeps for in-game sounds, a couple stock sports jingles, and this somewhat annoying, dreadfully cheerful tune that probably sounded better on the Casio keyboard that it originated on. I suppose in a perfect world, a Harlem Globetrotters video game would include some sort of rendition of the sweet Georgia Brown whistling tune you'd associate with that group, but I'd imagine it wouldn't sound that good here. Overall, Harlem Globetrotters fails to impress. What should have been a pretty fun, pretty goofy basketball game with lots of goofy antics is just a less than stellar, almost underwhelming basketball title that feels fairly half-baked. The bare-bones aspect of the game is bad enough, but the lack of player selection, a pause feature, finicky controls, and pedestrian gameplay loses points in replay value. I suppose for a quick throwaway basketball title among friends, this might be fun and certainly cheap enough for a lark, but a lark is all you're getting out of Harlem Globetrotters for the NES. When all is said and done, this one's harmless, but rather forgettable otherwise.